Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and in today's video we're looking at day 2 of Wind and Truth. Wind and Truth is the 5th book in the Stormlight Archive series and is split into a 10-day time frame where we know this very important event is happening at day 10. Previous books in this series have been split into parts, but this is a little bit more specific with 10 days. I'm looking at day 2 today and just giving my thoughts and feelings on the development so far. As predicted, our characters have splintered into several different factions. Actually, more factions than I anticipated from day 1, because Shallan is having to go on this secret undercover mission with looking at the Ghost Bloods. Speaking of which, I made a promise in video 1 to try to avoid larger COSMERE spoilers, but I really don't see how that's going to be possible here, since we're directly interacting with the one force that we know beyond the shards that is planet hopping and has a substantial foothold in the larger COSMERE. But I actually want to start with Kaladin and Szeth's stories because I find those so far the most engaging, which was kind of surprising as Shallan has historically been my favorite character. We started getting the background chapters. Each book in this series has one character that it focuses on for these background chapters that serve as kind of a how they got where they are now, as well as further fleshing out the world. And for this book, it is Szeth, the assassin in white, who we were introduced to, I think, I'd have to look back, but he might be the very first character we met in book 1. I think Szeth is an interesting choice, not only because of that connection back to the first book, but also because his homeland and his people have been probably one of the least explored in Roshar. Shinovar is a very interesting place, and it further emphasizes something that I feel is well executed in the Stormlight Archive, which is the importance of ecological and geographical features on this planet. We have a storm that rages across the entire planet, but because of this line of mountains and because of its position in Roshar, Shinovar gets far less extreme version of that storm, and as a result, the flora, the plants there, much more closely resemble the plants we have here on Earth, what we would consider as normal. And it's very interesting to see Kaladin experience that for the first time and his perspective on these plants that don't retract, don't retreat, don't move, don't even seem alive, really. It's a small detail, but it's one that really does emphasize that element of the story that has fallen to the wayside in recent volumes because of our focus on this larger world-spanning conflict. There are also a couple of other interesting parallels harkening back to previous entries in the series. Every time someone says that they're going to take the next step or they're unsure if they can take the next step, especially when they're around Dalinar, I can't help but feel like it's an intentional nod to Oathbringer and Dalinar discovering that the most important step a man can take is the next step. Similarly, there's a focus in this volume in particular on modernization and the need for people to step away and allow others to develop on their own. That very strongly echoes the events on Scandriel with Harmony, who is a god that feels unable to act because Harmony is the fusion of these competing desires of preservation and ruin. There's difficulties in Harmony guiding humanity on that planet in the way that he would like. And here, not only do we see that echoing in the rapid modernization of this planet due to the rediscovery of the Knights Radiant and the tower in Urithiru, which is equipped with a lot of modern day technology, moving doors and moving platforms, those types of things, with Navani making the argument that it's making life easier and it's making life better. But we've also seen how that modernity and how that complacency can come back and be a negative thing elsewhere in the COSMERE. Taravangian is embodying this already, since he is a man who was already split between his vast intelligence and his vast compassion, but never able to experience both at once. This dichotomy helps Taravangian escape the more problematic aspects I have with these kind of mastermind characters, such as Light from Death Note, who only seems like he is intelligent because the plot basically warps around him. I feel like the same is true for Taravangian in a lot of ways. However, because he is at war with himself and at war with his own compassion, I feel like that does help to dampen that a little bit and make me a little less frustrated with his characterization. This back and forth within our antagonist makes an excellent parallel to Harmony, who is ultimately trying to do good, whereas Taravangian is perceived or is presented as ultimately doing things for the wrong reasons, or going about them in the wrong ways. The intros to the chapters were echoing this sentiment of the need for leaders to step down and for people to step back and allow people to flourish, allow their people to flourish, allow innovation to occur. It's also aligning with this larger theme. And it made me wonder, because this is supposed to be a parable written by a king in ancient times, like from thousands and thousands of years ago, if I remember correctly, if this also plays some role in Honor's disappearance, because there are several discrepancies, different changes from the previous cycle of war and more or less peace that has been the entire history of Roshar. This last cycle, due to its length, the amount of time that the Lone Herald was able to hold out before giving in to the Fused, being a period of several thousand years for Roshar to develop in ways that it's not been able to do before, to the absence of honor, which also likely pushed the development of the planet in a way that it has not been before, as cultivation would have been the only shard affecting that planet directly for that period of time. I wonder if this is meant to imply that Honor's death and absence is actually an intentional thing, a stepping back as the king in this parable does. I nevertheless saw that connection and saw these different elements that are all speaking to the same concept of the need for innovation, the need for letting go and allowing humanity to develop on its own, and for rulers to step back, for leaders to step back. I found that concept rippling across the COSMERE in so many different places. A very interesting facet of this book. I mentioned a standout chapter for day 1. My standout chapter for day 2 is the one that sees Lift and Hoyd interacting with one another. Not only do we get some insight into why Lift is the way she is, why she's obsessed with staying the same, but we got this projection of a potential future self where she is very confident and wearing the attire of her people, standing taller, maybe was a little bit older. And I'm wondering, because I know that there is going to be a gap between book 5 and book 6 of about 10 years, if Lift is one of the characters, because she is very young, who is going to carry over and be one of the mainstays or the protagonists of part 2. I also just loved her and Hoyt playing off of each other. There's a great bit where they're talking about language, which really exemplified both of their characters in a great way and was a little bit of levity in the scene. I do think that Sanderson overall is doing a good job of balancing the humor and the serious bits together. Finally, we had the interlude chapters, and honestly, for me, the magic of the interlude chapters in the early books was seeing characters that were outside of the scope of the main narrative. And yeah, maybe they got folded in later, but it really did lend a sense of scale to the story and a sense of exploration, where you're just going off to these far off lands and seeing how this random person was impacted by it or was not, how they were dismissive of the things that were going on. And as time has gone on, more and more often those interlude chapters are just these like direct one-offs that involve characters that we maybe don't want to have be point of view characters all the time. I believe in both Interlude Section 1 and Interlude Section 2, we had a Taravangian chapter. So these aren't bad chapters. I am enjoying the exploration of Taravangian, seeing things from his perspective, and getting a better sense of the conflict that he is dealing with right now, both internal and external. But I do really miss that magic of here's just a guy, here's just a farmer, here's just some random person, and let's hear about like what their day is like and how they're trying to grapple with what's going on in this world. Those are my thoughts for day 2. I'm skipping over wide swaths of information. I didn't talk about Shallan or Adolin in this one at all, because I think their stories so far have been fairly straightforward, and not a whole lot has stood out to me in that development. Dalinar is doing some crazy things with trying to connect to the spiritual realm, but as a lot of those are still kind of in progress, and we seem to be mostly going through and like dealing with these minor conflicts leading up to something bigger. There just wasn't a whole lot for me to grab onto that stood out to me beyond just like the continuation of their stories. I actually picked up my physical copy of Wind and Truth today, starting the book on page 327, and I think my goal by the end of the weekend is going to just be to 500. I'm not going to try to set insane goals. I've heard that the second half of the book gets crazy and it's going to be very important for the story moving forward. So as much as I would like to push myself to get this read quickly and stay on top of the new hotness, I do want to enjoy the read, but I'm also balancing that against needing to get some other things done during this month. So we'll see how it goes. I'll be back sometime next week with a check-in. Maybe I'll do a couple of days instead of just doing it a single day at a time. But I want to continue these check-ins and these thoughts to not only talk to those of you who are also reading through this book as it's just come out, but to record my thoughts as I go through the book to look back on later. I hope your reading journey is going well. To all those out there reading Wind and Truth, I hope you are enjoying the story and are pulling at the threads and connecting ideas across the COSMERE. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe to grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.